Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's satsang. The topic is applying Sanatana Dharma for psychological wellness. So it will be an introductory kind of a session. Not much will be possible today itself in terms of talking about the details of how or where it, how do we apply it. For that, we normally would recommend the detailed webinar, the 10 sessions webinar of Bring Out the Best in You, the Sanatana Dharma way. So we'll begin this by a little prayer. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So the topic will be covered in 4 segments. We'll look at what are the challenges that we face in our daily lives, what is the concept that we are offering through this particular topic, and hoping that at the end we have the clarity so that it can be applied. And then we'll look at what is psychological wellness. Actually, I have done this talk with titles changed as holistic wellness, but I think there isn't much of everything else covered here. Mostly we'll be talking about psychological wellness today. We'll talk about what is Sanatana Dharma, because it is about establishing what it is, and then how do we apply it for betterment of our daily lives. And towards the end, we'll spare some time for question and answers. So our approach generally in Soham Vidya is what we call as a bold perspective, based on evidence, and we try to be objective in appraising the scope of the subject. We value global learning and applying it locally in a relevant fashion, and we want to be decisive and clear in our messages. So according to us, global doesn't necessarily mean Western thought alone, because unfortunately that is how it translates a lot of the times. So it should really be Western, Eastern, or for that matter anything globally related, as well as we can say global native wisdom. So what are the challenges, concepts, and clarities, and what's the psychological wellness how do we define it? We'll start with one particular karika, or karikas are almost like, you can say, shlokas. The difference is that they are very instructive, and you can say there isn't much difference, actually speaking. So this Sankhya karikas are actually based on the darshana of Sankhya Yoga. So there are Shad Darshanas, the Astika Darshanas. Among them, Sankhya is most possibly the first proposed kind of darshana. And then we have the Nyaya, Vaiseshika, and Mimamsas as well. So it says, Dukkhatraya bhigatat Jignasa tad abhigatake hetau Drishte sapartha chen naikantat atyantataha abhavat. It basically translates as, there are 3 types of dukkha, or the suffering, and they are adhyatmika, adi bhautika, and adi daivika, as they are called. So we can say internal sufferings, as in bodily sufferings or the mental sufferings, because adi bhautika is actually divided into the bodily, sharirika and manasika. So here we already see that the sufferings are recognized to be physical as well as mental. And the causes can be either internal or it could be external. So adi daivika and adhyatmika. So whether we like to believe it or not, so there are understood to be some spiritual or the extra or paranormal kind of experiences are also included in this. But other things are, for instance, the catastrophes of natural events, as they call ativrishti, anavrishti, and as such. So all these are causes of suffering. And it is argued that we have enough means to help ourselves through the suffering. In the olden days itself, there has been this debate that, well, there are medical means, there are surgeries as well. Why do we have to kind of worry about alleviating the suffering beyond what is worldly? So there are enough answers in this world itself that can help us get out of the suffering, is some argument, but not so say the Sankhya Karikas, as they point out that how much can you really kind of achieve through worldly means to get out of the sufferings? Can you really do that? It's not so. And we need to look for at precise and permanent ways to alleviate suffering, and the only way to do so is to look for cosmic answers, is what they actually propose. I think that's perhaps going to be very important way to kind of proceed here onwards, because what we are looking for as challenges, today's world demands our complete mental and sensory preoccupation. So as much as I, for instance, do these kind of webinars, this is, if you compare about 20-30 years ago, and I was living then, I would have been making handwritten notes, and I would have been delivering talk orally without much, if at all, maybe I would have used a blackboard or something. But now the amount of time I actually spend on the devices is uncomparable. You can't, it was never the case that a human mind was spending so much time, or even the senses were spending so much time. Just after I finish the webinar, I may be on the phone with somebody, or I may be watching a YouTube, or I may be chatting with somebody on WhatsApp, or I may be watching a television program. There is no end to it. You are just bombarding yourself left, right, and center with all your senses and the mind. And the minute you want to free yourself from it, you get bored. And we don't actually now use the word boredom anymore, because nobody really knows what boredom is anymore, because you're always preoccupied. And that is a challenge, because there is a capacity and we are exhausting the capacity. And one can argue that mental health problems are on a steep rise, mainly also because of the kind of stressful lives. Work is very demanding. You have to be present at work, morning to evening and 5 days a week at least. And that goes on for a good many years of your life. Possibly at least 40 years of your life is spent working with all the kind of demands. And so, yeah, I mean, it may sound like ridiculous to kind of make this argument, but that's what it is. If you compare it with at least 100 years ago, for instance. And because we are living isolated lives, it is perhaps best to say that self-help is the need of the hour. How are you going to help yourself? And health iceberg, if you look at it, we often focus on physical health, whereas emotional health, for that matter, is not really talked about. So this nicely kind of sums up a lot of those things which we don't we ignore. And when we talk about holistic wellness, it is not just physical health, it is about everything else as well, mental and spiritual health also. The samsara that we are in, the worldly kind of life that we lead, how do we help ourselves really when we are actually deprived of natural living? Wherever we look, we are actually, more and more, we're living in concrete kind of settings. And perhaps when was the last time you would have been nicely sleeping under the sky, gazing at the stars? Does anybody remember? When was the last time any of you were nicely sleeping under the sky?
About 2 years back.
Oh, that's good. That's nice. Can you describe how it was, where it was?
We went to my wife's village
Uh-huh.
in UP,
Mm-hmm.
and it was they sleep pretty much outside every day.
Okay.
And yeah, we were there for 2 nights, and we slept open sky and able to see a little bit of stars, more stars than what we usually see in the village setting.
Yeah, that's nice. So was it a memorable experience then?
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's great. So anybody else? When was the last time you slept under the sky, gazing at the stars?
Namaste. In my childhood days, we used to sleep in summer, whole summer, upstairs, open space.
So it was a long time back, would you say? So since your childhood, you haven't done that.
Yes, yes.
Hmm. So I guess this is not going to be any different to most of us. Um, why is it important? Basically, we're talking about living in an environment deprived of natural kind of settings, and also we'll how do we help ourselves within the environment deprived of relations, especially if you're on your own all the time. Nowadays we lead lives just by ourselves because we are traveling across the world as well, and also deprived of time. For us now, time is almost like, if only I had time, I would have done this. If only I had time, I would have traveled around the world. I would have played golf, or I would have done charity. If only I had time. It's almost like you're running against time. Um, so these are the challenges. And if we actually have these challenges, what's the concept we are talking about here? So it's an intervention modeled on Sanatana Dharma, naturally. That's the topic today. Now, I'll be using interchangeable words. So I may be using Atma Vidya, or I may just use the English word spirituality for it. So some of the slides may say spirituality, some of the slides may just say Atma Vidya, some of the slides may say Sanatana Dharma. So they all mean the same. We are all inherently spiritual beings. Atma Swarupas is the model that we are trying to kind of bring in here. We are here to learn lessons, to progress within, and to understand the purpose of our life. That's as per the Karma Siddhanta. But the problem was that we have forgotten the way with all the distractions around us. Okay, so that's because of Maya. So these are three important concepts we need to remember. We're talking about the fundamentals of Sanatana Dharma here. The most important understanding is that I'm the Atman, and I'm actually here having taken birth because of the Karma Siddhanta. That is to learn lessons, make amends, make myself, realized so that I can attain moksha. But the distractions are continuously going to keep me busy with everything else apart from the realization. That's the Maya. So these are important concepts to always keep in mind for the rest of our lives. It's not just for now. It should be like a constant kind of remembrance in terms of these concepts. Mental well-being is going to be two parts, thinking well and feeling well. It's not just about feeling alone. Feeling is obviously emotions, and when you say thinking well, um, there's a lot of training to be done, and we can train ourselves. We can train ourselves not to kind of worry too much. We can train ourselves not to think too much, or we can train ourselves not to think negatively, or we can train ourselves to be objective in our thinking, not to be unrealistic in appraising situations. There's a lot that can be done, because if we do that, it translates into how we help ourselves feeling better, and then it leads to we conducting ourselves better. So it's in a way you can say that it's thought, behavior, and emotions, the cognitive triad that we speak about in psychology settings. Okay, so if we think well, if we feel well, then it translates into conducting well. And how do we build a holistically healthy society? That should be also thought about, because it's not just about me as an individual. we should be in a position to kind of make this society a better place as well through the same concept. Traditionally, we understand well-being as a psychological well-being as a mixture of a social, biological, and psychological. I'll just quickly explain what this means. Biological would mean that I'm a machine, a biological machine made of electrical impulses and chemicals. So that is how my body runs. And if there is any problem somewhere, I'm rectifying the electric impulses or the chemicals through biological mechanisms, through medications or through something similar to that. So that's the biological model. When we say psychological model, we are talking about we are as individuals who have developed a particular mindset since our younger days, and we're shaped out to be a person, and we therefore play out accordingly in situations. Social obviously is very much about what is happening outside us. It could be relationships, it could be school, it could be work, or it could be societal happenings, employment, all those things put together comes at a social. Now, these all have an impact on a person's well-being. Now, what is missed is that, or being recognized now, is the spiritual component as well. So it's not about lack of spirituality naturally is nothing but not having the necessary tools to help ourselves. But if I have the spiritual awakening, if I'm actually kind of spiritually inclined and look at the concepts for my own betterment, then it surely is going to help me resolve a lot of issues. So this is where we're going to now focus upon how do we channelize the understanding and practice of Sanatana Dharma for betterment of our own lives. So I often ask this set of questions in my webinars, and I don't want to bore you to it again, but perhaps those who are new today may wish to kind of understand why this is important. The answers here are yes. There is no as an answer. It's almost like saying, I don't want to hear a no from you. And that's because it's impossible for you to even think of saying a no to any of these questions. Because if I ask you want to be loving, you would want to be loving. And if you want to be content, nobody says, I don't want to be content. You want to be truthful, and similarly, you want to be fearless. So essentially, we want to do these things because these are very basic requirements for us to have a meaningful life. But for us to kind of be able to kind of fulfill those or enjoy those, like being loving, being content, being fearless, and being truthful, there should be a guiding path, isn't it? And a guiding path to achieve these results. And I'll give you the options that it could either be what we make it as a human law, or what we can consider as a cosmic law. Or we can, if we want to use the Sanskrit words because it translates better, it's the Manava Dharma or the Vishwa Dharma, one which we as humans form. What are the examples of a human law, for instance? A human law could be a constitution of a particular country that we have written for us to have a better cohesive society. Or it could be the legal framework, or it could be the police code, penal codes or police codes, and all these things. So these are all human laws. They're written up for better, management of the society. But similarly, there is something like a cosmic law. Now, we'll look at the differences between these two, as in the difference is basically that human law has its own kind of value, but it has its limitations in that there are certain things which it may not be able to kind of give you the answers for. I'm not going to the details of it because that is actually an extensive topic, and we actually cover it elsewhere in other webinars. So if we actually look at what do you see as part of cosmic law or the Sanatana Dharma that we can refer to here? It is truth. It is the truth. It's the cosmic truth. It is love, and it is everlasting, constant, and unchanging. And it's not affected by time and space. And it encourages openness to learn. It empowers us to question within with a systemic method of inquiry, and it guides us. But yet, it liberates us to be on the path of seeking truth. It brings us joy and contentment, and its principles are universally applicable. And um, and it teaches us that universe is our home. So this is where Sanatana Dharma is actually kind of explained as the cosmic law, and it has its own benefits. Again, we have a lot of questions generally. What is Sanatana Dharma? I don't think we can cover everything in one session here, but it is important to ask ourselves these questions. The usual questions are understanding self, who am I? And that comes under Sanatana Dharma. Who am I? As in, I'm the Atman, says Sanatana Dharma. That's the divinity within. And what is my relation with the world around? Am I part of the world, or am I the whole world, for instance? That's also a concept of Sanatana Dharma, isn't it? And then existential inquiries: where did I come from? Where do I go from here? The cosmic journey that we talk about. And what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What am I supposed to do with this current life in this particular body that I have? So these are all the questions that we need to ask ourselves honestly and find answers. Spirituality, you can say, is nothing but me as the Atman playing the game of life using cosmic rules. Now, what are those cosmic rules that we can talk about? I'll just mention very simply a little later. But there are three aspects of me who are going to deal with this. So it's me alone. How do I understand myself? Who am I? Is the core aspect of it. And then how do I deal with my life? Now, when I say my life, we already have to establish that there are two aspects of me. One, the spiritual me, who is the Atman, and my life is actually related to my body, the mind, and the senses. So the life is actually related to something outside me. Or in other words, I can say that the me in me is immortal. It doesn't die. It always exists or existed. My life, basically, life itself is something which is temporary, and it has a start point and an end point. And that is the difference that I'm going to appreciate. And I'm going to learn how do I relate myself with my two parts of me, my immortal self and the mortal vehicle that I'm carrying with me. But I have to carry this mortal vehicle with me because that is the rule of the game. As I spoke to you earlier, as I said, it's like me playing the cosmic. What was that? So let me say that. Yeah, it's me playing the game of life using cosmic rules. So the game of life here is that I have a body I have to take care of, and I have to live in the family. I'm living in a society. I'm living in an environment. And how do I play the game of me relating to all these things? But yet realizing that I am the Atman, and then pursuing my journey in that direction. Okay, and then me and the cosmos naturally is the larger kind of journey. I'm actually a cosmic being, and this tiny speck of this life is only a small, it's like a train going on a long journey and stopping at various stations. And right now I'm at a station called Srinivas, and this is the station I need to get down, explore, go around, see the go to the beautiful buildings, temples, everything, and then get back on train again and go to the next station. So it's a cosmic journey. So this is how it works. And again, I'll want to keep it very simple in terms of I'm not using any Sanskrit words here, because this is a very basic introductory kind of a session. Understanding that I am the same universal energy, but a tiny spark within this body. Okay, so this is what it is that I want to realize. And it is like me being a drop of water in the ocean. The ocean and the water are qualitatively no different, both are the same. And it is the individual's journey to find meaning in life with a realization that I have come from this energy and I will eventually merge in it. But where do we start? What will be the kind of a good starting point? I always say this, that it's not really such a hard task to start practicing spirituality if we honestly want to do it. And a good way is to start seeing who you are, as in what is your own truth, like in what are your feelings, what are your thoughts, what are your actions like, how true are you to understanding all these aspects of you. If we start doing it, if we actually kind of paying more attention to it, that itself is extremely beneficial, because the more we then start to get in tune with who we are, whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't matter then. It is just about, am I in sync with who I am? Because the last thing I want to do is have some feelings in me, but I project myself outwardly very differently. So there is a kind of disconnect there, and the more the dissonance there, the more anxiety it brings in you. So at least first step is figuring out who you are as a person, and then once you do it, the more you train yourself, that becomes a stepping stone for understanding the cosmic truth. Cosmic truth is obviously a larger concept, but that's ultimately truth too. So we start with at least appraising who we are. So we need to experience it. So that's why Sanatana Dharma is very much about an experiential kind of a journey. It is not a belief based journey. It's not like there is God, you believe it. You have to do so many things, so and so, and then that's the end of it. You don't need to worry about anything, because if you worship this particular God in a particular way, you will go to heaven. If you don't, you'll go to hell. That's a belief based. Whereas Sanatana Dharma, it's all about experience based. And how do you experience? You don't experience, or you don't practice experiencing unless you actually know who you are, what are your feelings, what are your thoughts, what are your actions. That's a good starting point. Okay, any questions so far? I can just pause for a moment, or anything people wish to say. Just raise your hands if you need to stop me at any point of time. So it's a process of self-awareness, which involves introspection and learning from life lessons, perceiving and being true to emotions, as I said just a little while ago, accepting and owning responsibility, making clear choices, and do all these while being content with ourselves, but yet still be passionate about life. That's a paradox there, because the reason I actually state both is, one may say that just be content with life. Content with life may be taken as, I'll stay where I am. I don't need to do anything else. But what about the world around? There are certain demands the world is expecting of you, as in, you need to respond to your relations, you need to respond to your work, you need to kind of look at your health. Maybe there are certain things you need to address. You need to go to the doctors. You can't just say, I'm content with my health problems. I know I have this big illness. I'm content with it. I'm not doing anything. We can say so, but there are other people who may be living on, living dependent on you, for instance. So it doesn't work always like that. So the idea should be that as long as I'm living on this particular plane and in this vehicle, I should still be keeping it in a good shape. I'm just metaphorically only saying about the body, but it's about the mind as well as the senses. And when you keep them nicely kind of serviced, like service a car, you need to have that degree of passion to lead the life, but not be attached again. So that's again the part of the game. You should have the required drive to lead life, but at the same time not get attached to it, hooked to it in a way that it drains you or it kind of pulls you in a different direction. So if you go through this again, so it's a process of self-awareness, which involves introspection and learning from life lessons. Everything is a lesson to learn, good and bad. Perceiving and being true to emotions, accepting and owning responsibilities, making clear choices, and doing all these while being content and yet being passionate about life. And spirituality teaches us to strive for progress within. And we become aware that we have no ownership of results. Where does this come from? This comes from the Bhagavad Gita shloka of Karmanyavadhikaraste maphaleshu kadachana, where we are duty bound but not associated or attached to the results. And that material gain or loss is a mere byproduct. While following principles of spirituality, we appreciate that we may go wrong in this human world. We spoke about it, I think, the last time, I don't remember. But we will not go wrong in the cosmic or the spiritual world. So if you follow the principles of spirituality, you may make a huge loss, most disastrous kind of experience. But if you are actually sticking to the Dharma, this is nothing but a speck of life in your long cosmic journey, right? But we are so kind of engrossed in the speck, thinking this is the whole life, that we are lost in the kind of irrelevant aspect. So instead, we need to go beyond, see that it is actually just a speck in the cosmic life. And in the cosmic life, you are not going to go wrong, because as long as you are following the Dharma in the right way, you will only be making gains as you go along. But it may be a disastrous life this time. That is nothing to kind of worry about, if I can say so. So what are the kind of teachings? Some of the teachings are, for instance, Ayam Nija Paroveti Ganana Lagu Chetasam Udara Chiritanam Tu Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So Dharma actually teaches us a model of how do we kind of train ourselves cognitively, think properly in such a way that we look at the world in the right way, look at ourselves in the right way. Even from a psychiatric perspective, there has been quite a bit of interest in spirituality and its application in psychological well-being. And it is identified that it definitely has good kind of contribution to make. So therefore, in the Royal College of Psychiatrists in UK that I belong to as a member, we do have a special interest group for spirituality there. And if I just mention a couple of psychiatrists who have been, I would believe, have made massive contributions to the world of spirituality and its relation to psychological well-being. I think Dr. Brian Weiss, who has written several good books on past life regression therapy and various clients that he had gone through. He says we need to share this knowledge with everyone. We have been given more capacity than we grasp. Everyone should make effort to reach a state of realization. And we have taken birth to learn lessons to progress spiritually. Similarly, we have Dr. Michael Newton as well, who is a psychologist and has done wonderful work on past life regression therapies, and he's written books like Destiny of Soul and Journey of Souls. And he says everything that we need to understand in this world is hidden in our mind. We have been given the ability to grasp the subtle aspects of universe, and we just need to tap into it. So what are the benefits then of being spiritually inclined? So you have spiritual Laukika benefits here and now, and the Vaishvika benefits, the cosmic realm. So you will be a winner both ways. But I've already said earlier that sometimes things can go in a very disastrous way here and now. But we can't just generalize everything. So similarly, when we look at benefits of spirituality and what are the benefits of spirituality here and now, we will definitely be seeing a lot of benefits, because the biggest benefit we are looking for is ultimately me being content, peaceful, happy, emotionally stable. Who can ask for a better benefit than that here and now? And that's the biggest benefit we will obviously be getting. Yeah, so I would have to mention it here that religion and spirituality are really not the same. We talk about it again at a different in a depth in a different webinar. All I can say is that if you take a spiritual text and you don't use it as a guide anymore, but it becomes a command, then that's what religion is. I mean, it just basically says this is the truth and nothing but the truth, and beyond that, you are not allowed to look. So that's kind of a problem there. So we wouldn't want to kind of equate them. Spiritual freedom is essential to experience Atma Vidya. I mean, if you want to kind of realize that. So how do we apply it for betterment of our daily lives? So let's look at some examples. See, including spirituality means that the individual develops the self-awareness of concepts of spirituality which guide them throughout their journey. And here are some concepts that I can speak of, and these are all from Bhagavad Gita alone. It's not to say that it's exclusive to Bhagavad Gita. They're found elsewhere too, as in other kind of Sanatana Dharmic scriptures. So you have Prema or Daya, the love and kindness. You have Karuna, compassion, Swadharma, loyalty to one's own duty. Samadrashti, the equanimity, seeing everyone the same, seeing everyone as the Atman. Nishchay Buddhi, the decisiveness, clarity in thinking. Satya, the truth. Titiksha, tolerance. Nirbhaya, being fearless. Shashvata, that I am immortal. I am actually the Atman, therefore I am immortal. Trikarana Shuddhi, Mano Chitta, Manasa Vacha Karmana, as we call it, unison in thought, word, and action. And Nishkama Karma, being detached to the result. And Sthita Prajnata, balance of emotions, Swaswarupa Parijnana, self-awareness. There are applications of each of them in different settings, and we actually go through case scenarios as well when we talk about these things in our 10 sessions webinar on Sanatana Dharma and how do we utilize it in our daily lives. So as I said, this is an introductory session, introductory in the sense we won't be able to kind of go into the details in this very short span. If we understand it from a therapeutic point of view, so my point here is that if Sanatana Dharma or spirituality is going to be utilized in therapeutic setting, well, that's definitely possible. So if a person already has spiritual awareness or a preferred religious method, therapists can utilize their awareness in therapy to help resolve their problems. That is entirely possible. It's not happening, though. I must say, it's not happening. This is something which we need to kind of advocate. And when we do that, we should be in a position to assess the therapeutic benefit from applying Sanatana Dharma in a therapy setting. We need to look at the acceptance among the therapists as well as the patient, as well as the clients, so that it can be done on in mainstream practice. It can be taught in education institute as well, like how do we utilize Sanatana Dharma in your daily life. So though there are a lot of applications, but we need to start somewhere. The reason we are not doing it is unfortunately because spirituality is clubbed along with religion, and there's always this effort to keep religion out of the kind of academic space, and which is fine, but spirituality is unfortunately being ignored because it is always tagged to that as pseudoscience. So let me give you some tasters of application in therapy. For instance, the understanding that I'm not the physical body. So look at the way we can kind of then have this difference in approach. If I identify myself with the vehicle, that I'm actually the body, or I'm the mind, and I'm the senses, or I'm the product of these, then I indulge in them. Whereas if I actually understand that these are all the tools that I am utilizing for my own benefit, then I'm something else but not these tools, then I use them in the right way, or at least I'm not attaching or I'm not indulging in them. So there itself comes the difference in approach. So and then the reassuring concept of immortality of spiritual self versus the fear of death of the body. So that's another thing that can always be kind of reassuring. I and mine versus the universal consciousness. So I'm part of this world. I love everything the same way as I love myself, because everything has Atman in it. So that's the concept you bring about with the universal consciousness there. Okay, so there are very specific kind of applications if you want to look at it. Garuda Purana specifically talks about the soul a life after death of the physical body. What happens to that Atman after it leaves the physical body? So there is the Pitra Karma that is done for 10 days. And there is the understanding that the Atman actually then goes to the Pitraloka, the ancestral plane. So the concepts, when they're explained, understood, and they are kind of rehearsed, revised, it can actually alleviate a lot of pain and suffering for the loved ones who has when they lost somebody in their family. So now why do we mention this? See, ultimately bereavement counseling has to be culture specific, and it can't just be one shoe fits all, one size fits all. It can't be. Or if it is just left secular, in a secular fashion, where I'm not touching on cultural, spiritual, religious kind of any of these aspects, I'm just touching it superficially. You go home and you may still be doing certain kind of rituals, for instance, and not knowing what is happening there. Actually, there is this beautiful part of the kind of tradition that when somebody is lost, the next 10 days there is the family coming together to mourn, right? And then they are reading. I don't know about rest of Indian community, but at least the part I come from, the 10 days you're supposed to read the Garuda Purana. And when you're actually reading it, you understand the journey of the soul after it leaves the body. And it's quite reassuring then to know that it's going to a safe place and it has a rebirth again, and that I would actually very likely meet them again in another life. Now these concepts are all very reassuring. It definitely has value in designing bereavement counseling for culture, and it can be culture specific. And the example we have to take is obviously coming from a Hindu background. How do we apply it for the Hindu community? Similarly, premarital and marriage counseling also needs to be culture specific. And unfortunately, the Hindu marriages that we have nowadays, there's not much of understanding as to what it means and what the roles are supposed to be after the marriage, and leading to a lot of divorces and unreasonable or unrealistic expectations, all those things. So we can actually design or apply the grihastha dharma and the marriage ceremony, the vivaha mantras. They can be actually kind of utilized to deliver the premarital counseling and even the marriage counseling later on. And similarly, I have developed a couple of modules which are like discover yourself and discover your inner potential. Now, discover yourself is based very much on the whole idea that I am the Atman, and discover your inner potential is very much modeled on the concept of Sat, the truth, the cosmic truth. And there are other applications, like as I said already, past life regression therapy. There is pranic healing as well. So definitely there are all these. I'll finish with some examples on how you actually kind of utilize from a cognitive point of view. How do you help yourself through thinking and modeling your thinking? Let's look at Ramayana, where Rama actually kind of is now exiled, as in he's supposed to go on exile. Kaikeyi kind of delivers the makes the kind of appeal, and Dasharatha sanctions it, and he's supposed to go, and Lakshmana is furious. So they both are having a conversation, and in that, basically, I'll just go into the English translations because we may not have much time. So, deeply pained yet self-possessed Rama, heaving sighs like an elephant, went towards the inner apartment of his mother along with his brother. What does it say? It basically says that Rama, like any other person, is actually suddenly emotionally distraught. He's heard an unexpected news. Imagine he's being crowned as a prince. He must be walking to the father thinking of something like, okay, he's going to talk to me about the ceremony or how I should be conducting myself as a king in future. Maybe that's what my father wants to talk to me about, is what he would have thought about as he was walking to Dasharatha. And then he gets to hear a news which is completely out of the blue, comes as a shock. So he is very much like any other human. He is experiencing the emotional distress. So he's heaving like an elephant. So that's as bad as his breathing and his panting. So just keep that in mind, because let's not get this impression that Rama being Rama, no emotions felt. No, he's not a robot. He has experienced the emotions. Okay, so that's one part. Now, then what happens next? Kausalya basically says later on, look, I'm actually unfortunate. I did not have the fortune or Rama to enjoy any auspicious moment or pleasure earlier when my husband was in authority. I exist with a hope that I will have it when my son assumes authority. So she is experiencing disappointment just as much as she's in a grief. Okay. Lakshmana now says, the king has a perverse nature. He's aged, he's overpowered by passions, he is under the spell of carnal pleasures, and is incited by Kaikeyi. Such a man can speak anything. So he's pretty furious. And in fact, he is basically also saying that the Dasharatha, the way he has responded, he was led by sensory pleasures. And Lakshmana further said, even if our father instigated by Kaikeyi becomes our enemy, he shall be imprisoned or even slain. So there's vengeance there that Lakshmana is speaking of. So we have seen four characters there. One is Rama, who hasn't said anything yet, but he has surely been experiencing some, what we in psychiatry call as the physiological symptoms of anxiety, either fast breathing, fast heart rate, sweating, and such, apprehension. But he didn't say anything yet. Lakshmana is in vengeance. He's actually kind of talking about, he's quite angry, he's vocalizing it. Kausalya seems to be quite upset as well, and she's also kind of expressing her disappointment. Dasharatha, we know that he has been sensually involved. He was responding through his kind of wants and wishes, desires. Now look at how Rama responds. And this is where we need to pay attention to. Rama, like anybody else, would have gone to the same school. Lakshmana would have gone to the same school as in Gurukula. He's learned about the Karma Siddhanta. He's learned about Purusharthas, Dharmartha, Kama, Moksha. He would have learned about the Ashrama Dharmas. He would have learned everything very similar to anybody else. But it's about applying, understanding, and applying. So he's learned to apply it in his life in a way that it has made a significant change in how he processes it in his thoughts. And then that in turn helps to stabilize his own emotions. So this is what we need to focus upon, as how we apply Sanatana Dharma, the knowledge of it, and make our lives better. Okay. So here Rama says, even though my consecration was thwarted, there is no feeling of sadness in me. In fact, I controlled my mind by my intellect. Etaya tatvaya buddhya samstabhyatmanamatmana vyahate abhisheke me paritapo na vidyate. He is basically clearly demonstrating to us the process that he is able to do so because he is using his viveka, the intellect, to keep his mind and therefore his emotions under control. That is as good a demonstration of how do you kind of learn this whole process of applying Sanatana Dharma for psychological well-being. Okay, so as I said, he uses his intellect. Thoughts and decisions are balanced, therefore, and emotions are reined in, leading to contentment. And then the whole idea we said earlier, right? Think well and feel well. He's learned to think well, and therefore he's nicely kind of been able to balance his emotions. Now, what do we also learn from the first shloka that I showed? That he was automatically experiencing certain emotions or the physiological responses. It was automatic, because the minute you hear a bad news, you already automatically start experiencing it. It is little later that you bring in your viveka or the buddhi into play, process that information as per dharma, the dharmic framework, and then you realign your emotions accordingly. Okay, so this is how it is to be applied. So that is what I wanted to kind of show as an example. There are other examples too. I'll skip for now. So if I was to show you that we have a spiritual toolkit and how do we utilize it? The spiritual toolkit works like this. See, you need to spare your time and effort first to know yourself. I've already mentioned that a good starting point is to figure out who you are. And then you need to figure out the true purpose of your life. So once you have learned who you are and then the purpose of your life, then you do swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is important, which is learning scripture. Scriptural knowledge is important. Now you can do it through your own awareness from a guru or through scriptures. Ideally, it should come through a guru, if not through scriptures. If that is also not possible, you're in a desert or you're kind of illiterate, you can't see, whatever, I'm just giving examples. You can still do it through your own awareness. Once you do that, then you learn to balance your wisdom with logic, because logic alone is not going to win you over spiritually. Logic is perhaps a hindrance for your spiritual progress, because you overthink everything. But you need to bring in the wisdom as well, the acceptance, and then that works for you. So you need to balance wisdom and logic. And then you bring the viveka, the intellect. So developing the intellectual precision. Bhagavad Gita says Nishchaya Buddhi on several occasions. To differentiate the dual choices in your life, it's often easy to kind of pick between a tough choice and an easy choice. You'll obviously pick up the easy one. But there are several situations when you may have two tough choices and you have to pick only one of them, knowing well that you may go equally right and equally wrong. But that is the intellectual precision that you need to bring about, and the acceptance, the courage, all these are part of it then. And then you make the right choices. Right doesn't mean which is going to yield a result. Right at that point of time, what you think is right at that point of time, and it may very well go wrong later on. That's a different point. And once you've done that, then you surrender to the process by constant practice. And you practice it and practice it and practice it so that you think well and feel well. So this is where I'm going to stop, and hope to receive any questions or any comments. How to control emotions? I need a little bit more, because how to control emotions it's not a question that can be answered immediately. Depends on what is the context that you are referring to. I'm not too sure whether I can really give you an answer immediately for that, but I've already explained that emotions are going to be better controlled if you exercise the knowledge. And I said that perhaps we need to start being true to ourselves, understand who I am, what are my emotions like a lot of the times, how do I respond to situations. So you can see that it's very individual based. You need to start really working on figuring out who you are. Once you do that, and then once you apply, as I said, I gave the toolkit, and that's exactly what you're supposed to do. I can show that again. That's the only answer I can give you, because there is no other answer tailor-made for that particular question. Yeah, so there is a recording, so I'll share the recording later on. Can we believe in Garuda Purana? Is Sanatana Dharma, is Sanatana way of living relevant? And there are two questions there. Why do you have to believe in Garuda Purana? Okay. No, we are not. See, there are two aspects to it. Garuda Purana talks about Atma Vidya well. In fact, interestingly, this is a very similar question somebody actually asked last time round, because they said that I'm talking about spirituality and then I refer to Garuda Purana, which is a religious kind of text. I didn't have time to go through that debate then, but all I can say is that in Garuda Purana, Atma Vidya, the journey of the soul, is spoken of extremely in detail. And that's actually very important, and it's quite consistent with the Pitru Karma that we do. So how the subtle body is built in the 10 days. What you need to understand is we are focusing on Atma Vidya, as in I am the Atman, and I'm here having taken a birth, and this is part of my karmic cycle, having taken several births. And it is a conceptual consistency that you need to see. Otherwise, there is no way one can prove existence of the Atman. So belief or not believing is very much a person's individual kind of choice at the end of the day. But the way I answer is that anything which is related to spirituality, you cannot prove. If anybody says they can prove, then you are being misled. So unlike science, spirituality is about experience, and you can't kind of prove anything. So therefore, what you have to look at is consistencies in how it is described in various texts. And here what kind of prompted me to start these webinars and workshops was that I was satisfied that I have started seeing consistency in how Atmavidya was documented in ancient scriptures, and how Atmavidya is being documented, or let's use the word documented, in modern spiritual research. And modern spiritual research is mostly happening in the United States, as I said, about past life regression therapy, reincarnation studies, near-death experiences. And you read those books, and you understand that they're referring to the same concepts of Atman, karma, reincarnation. There's no difference whatsoever. And there are so many other similarities that you actually see when you read books like Destiny of Soul or Journey of Soul, the manifestations, the cyclical nature of cosmos. All those start kind of fitting in. And so therefore, if you look at the consistencies, irrespective of the times, past and the present, geographical and cultural documentations, one therefore can logically conclude that this is as believable as possible, although there is no proof that I can show you of the existence of the true nature of Atman. In fact, very funnily enough, if I am to say that I can show you Atman, that is completely kind of contradictory to the whole concept of Atman, which is beyond comprehension by the senses and the mind. It cannot be comprehended.